Hi, welcome back. I'm Angus at LabVac, and today up on the bench I've got a Pfeiffer DUO 3. Now this is the newer version of the DUO 2, which I've already made a video for. Don't see so many of these yet, but there's a huge number of 2s out there, so this is going to be a much more common sight on the bench. We're going to get inside and see what's changed and have a go at getting it to work again. I've already drained the pump of oil, so in traditional manner I'm going to start by getting rid of it doesn't sit quite straight because of the sight glass on the end, but we'll get there. So I'm going to start by getting rid of the base plate and the motor. Just get those out of the way. Grab some of my trusty pots to put things in. Now the motor on these, like on the 2, is bolted through from the pump end. So on here we've got 4 bolts, but only 2 of them hold the oil box, the other 2 hold the motor. So with a 5mm Allen key, we can get those out. There we go. Now the pump should come away from the motor. It's never quite as easy as you think it's going to be, but it will happen. There we go. So that's our motor and our shaft coupling. And a felt pad, which is saturated with oil. So this pump has had a shaft seal leak for sure. And we'll find out what else might be wrong with it as we get in there. So we can get the motor out of the way. I like to run and test the motors off the pump just to check for any noise and so on, so I'll do that before it goes back on. You can't do that with every pump. Some pumps are built in such a way that the motor can only run when it's got a pump built up onto it, but for this one we'll be able to test that. So we've got our outer shaft seal here. Could pull that from there, but I suspect it'll be easier once the pump's broken down. The next thing to do is to take the oil box off and find out what treats are inside. I can see from the sight glass, which is fairly brown, that this pump might not be super shiny, but with those bolts off there, it doesn't look too bad actually in there. Definitely seen worse, but yeah, this sort of brown, 1 or 2 things. It could just be cooked oil, which would look very much the same, or it could be something that's come into the pump. So I can immediately see it's of a family with the 2, but quite a few things have been changed here, which I think might make life easier, in that the pump mechanism can come out more readily from the adapter plate, which is this chunk back here. So the whole thing's held in by 2 long bolts here and here that go right the way through into the adapter, and then the valve block on the top has a couple of bolts of its own, and then up here is a bolt that runs through and joins those 2 sections together. I'm going to start by taking another pot for the dirty bolts or screws. Take those out of there. And the long ones out of there. It's all coming apart very easily. and then this one that I've left in holds this part onto the main body of the pump, so I'll leave that there just for the moment. And then this should, there we go, lift straight off. There's our pump cartridge, and this is our adapter. This is the inlet valve that closes to isolate the inlet when the pump's not running. So we can move the adapter over here just for the moment, get a closer look. That's the coupling that we could see from the outside when it was assembled. And then the valve block on the top here carries that inlet valve and also the oil control devices. So I'll pull that bolt out and then that will lift off there. That's the exhaust valve for the pump. The inlet flow comes in here, whoa, and down into the pump. Now, with the earlier, those are the bits that just flew across the bench. With the earlier Duo 2 model, the whole pump worked in reverse and the flow came in right to the rear end and then worked its way back, so the exhaust valve was up here. So that's the first major change that I can see. And the second one is that this is now a unibody, we call it that, kind of a single block with two end plates, whereas the Duo 2 is made up in separate stages. So this one kind of looks like it might be a bit more straightforward. So to finish off with the valve block here, obviously these parts have all pinged themselves out by spring pressure, which is great. There is a pad down at the bottom there that hasn't come free. That's normal. They rarely do just fall out, but we can easily get to that. We've got a side port here that I'm going to take out. It's got an O-ring under it, so that's got to come out to be replaced anyway. And now this is on the reverse side of that, so if I put a bit of air up behind it, it'll just pop that pad free. So it's got a rubber disc on this side, and that side faces onto the back of this valve, so it seals that off when it's closed. And that's everything out of that block. We can take the O-rings out here. These they look like funky shapes, but when they come in the kit they are just regular O-rings, and you shape them into the groove. They are mighty stiff. Chuck those over there. If you haven't seen one of my videos before, which you probably haven't because you only ever watch the ones that refer to the pump you've got, which is fair enough, I keep a pile. Everything that comes out I keep in a pile. All the O-ring seals and everything else, because it's very useful to have them as a reference. When you start to reassemble, you can go back. When you're checking the kit content, you've got something to check it against. And also, if the kit has parts and you don't know what they're for, you can compare to what you took out. And if you didn't take out a part like that, then it's obviously not for the pump you've got. The kits will always cover multiple pump models, so you will always have bits left over that are unrecognisable. So this is our final exhaust valve, which I can take off from there, put into another pot. So there's this is the valve itself, it's spring steel, and then there's a backing plate there that sits over the top. And then we can take the ends off and get into the pump. So that final bolt will come out of there. Oh, this thing's just falling apart in my hands. It's lovely. You normally have to throw hammers at things to make that happen. So that's our end plate. and rotor and valves there. And then the other end is doweled on, so there's no bolt to remove. But given that it has a dowel, it's going to be very tight to take out of there. So I'm going to get some leverage onto that. Those of you who are not from the UK, leverage is the same as leverage. Whoop. Kind of wish I'd done this while it was still being held in place by something else. Yeah, that's not really working, is it? Okay. Let's go old school on that one. There we go. Where there's a will, there's a way. So that's the end plate from the high vac end. And then in the rotor we can see down in here, that is our oil pump vane. And that does have curved ends. So when that goes back in, it needs to go back in the right way round. And then the rotor in here is one single piece, which pulls all the way through. So we've got a set of vanes in that end. And we have a second slot for the second set of vanes. Those obviously don't pull through, they're left behind up there. And you can see that the vanes for the two stages are identical. They're the same dimensions. The two stages are the same dimensions, which is why there's no interstage valve, because you can't build up a pressure in one as you would in a pump with two different size stages. So there's our one-piece rotor, two sets of vanes, stator and stator. We've kind of taken most things apart, haven't we? This is going well. Back on the adapter block, we've got various things here. We've got a little purge port here, which would allow you to introduce nitrogen, whatever purging gas you wanted to use. With this customer, I don't believe they're using that. We've got a gas ballast control here, which this is very common to see. There's a screw in here which locks that, so that can't actually be used. Most of the Pfeiffer pumps that come in have that screw in place, so the gas ballast is not being used at all. If you want to know more about that, have a look at the Duo 2 video, because it has exactly the same gas ballast, and I did talk in a little bit more detail about it back then. So all of this is going to get cleaned out. These ports are not really intended to be removed, so they can stay where they are, but O-rings and so on will come off and be cleaned out. The shaft seal, you can get good access to it here, so we'll pop that out. Where are my seal drivers? I've got a lot of work on at the moment, but I didn't want to let this go through the shop without being caught on camera, as it were. So to drive this out, I would normally use a larger driver than that, but it's off being used somewhere else, so hopefully this will do the job. There we go. A few sharp taps and that's popped the seal straight out. So that again will get replaced from the kit. And do you know what? There's nothing else to show you here. It's an extremely simple design. It's a complex design, but because of the complex machining on all of these parts, it does mean that there are very few bits for us to look at. So I'll take all of that away, put it through the ultrasonic and get it all clean, and then I'll come back and we'll look at reassembly. Okay, here we are back again with our Pfeiffer DUO 3 pump. Everything got a good thorough cleaning. Got rid of all of that goo that was in there. One of the things I didn't show you when I was stripping it down was taking apart the oil box to take the sight glass out. So the arrangement there is we had this plastic piece on the back with 6 screws in there. Underneath that was this sheet of glass. That's what I wanted to get out to give it a thorough clean. You remember I said it was brown with muck, and then underneath that is an O-ring which seals the whole lot up. So I took that apart and gave it a thorough clean, and I'm going to start with the reassembly by putting that back together. So in my kit, here's my kit. I've got my felt, say no more. I've got a formed seal O-ring to go in the sight glass, some springs, a load of other O-rings. I've got a shaft seal in there, which is the outer seal, and I've got this plunger pad doodah, which replaces the one, if you remember back at the beginning, it flew across the bench there when the spring let go. So I've got a replacement for that, which is unusual. I don't remember them supplying that in the kit for the DUO 2, so I do remember having to buy a lot of them to replace ones that were no good, but it's a different story. If that's going to come in the kits in future, great. Okay, so this seal that I've got here, actually, it's a square section. Couldn't tell that from the old one that came out. In fact, I'm sure the old one wasn't square section. Anyway, this one is, so they'll go in there. Like I said, and I tend to reiterate, the pumps change. You know, you'll have a pump that's on sale worldwide for 20 years. It'll have loads and loads of little changes through that lifetime as materials change or whatever. And so each of those little improvements tends to mean that the kits have quite a few bits that don't apply to the pump that's in front of you. Anyway, so with that seal in and the glass back on, cover goes on there. Now the cover is marked for minimum, maximum. So you want to remember to put that back on the right way round. Otherwise it will confuse. The minimum and maximum oil levels are critical. The minimum is fairly obvious. If there's not enough oil in the pump, then the pump's going to run dry and seize up. But the maximum is also critical. If you go way above the maximum level, then what will happen is you'll have oil sitting across the top of the pump over the valves and other mechanisms, and the pump will not be able to exhaust air efficiently, and it won't be able to regulate the oil flow if there's too much sitting on top. So you need to stick to the maximum mark just as much as you do the minimum. So we'll get this back on. With all the screws that we do up, you don't need to be wellying down on them. Definitely only use hand tools. It's tempting to use power tools because things might go a bit faster, but you're going to over torque screws. A lot of the screws, like these for example, they're stainless steel screws going into an aluminium body. So if you over torque them, what will happen is you'll strip the thread out of the aluminium body long before the stainless steel screw gives up. And the expensive part is the alley part. So if you ruin that, you're going to have a very expensive repair to do. So I've got a drain plug and a fill plug, which are going to need new O-rings. So I'm now going to start the glorious process of sifting through all the O-rings and trying to size the right ones for each job. There's a number of ways to go about this. One is to do the obvious ones first, which I think is what I might need to do in this case. Because there's nothing there that's leaping out at me. So we'll work our way through, and I'm sure we'll come up with a solution, won't we? So when I say the obvious ones, something like this, which is our adapter plate, all shiny. Here I've got an O-ring, obviously has to go into that groove. That groove is a very obvious size, so there is going to be one O-ring that fits that. Okay. It needs to stand proud, so when you're looking at it from the side on, obviously the O-ring needs to sit proud so that it's compressed when the next part presses onto it. But there we go. That's one out of the very large collection that I've got to deal with. Another one, we've got a very large one there. That can only be for sealing the oil box. So O-rings for sealing oil boxes are great in that they're, to an extent, reusable compared to the old cork that we used to have, or the printed gaskets that a lot of manufacturers use these days that fall apart the first time you open the pump. They can be tricky to fit though, these O-rings. This one is pretty good because it's got those tight corners. They grip the O-ring. Some other pumps that have much more rounded corners, the thing pops back out. That one's pretty good. So there's another one out of the way. I recognise these will be KF16. These will be the replacements for your external components. That's good, we'll use them, but for the moment I'm going to put them out of the way. And then we're starting to make a little modicum of progress, shall we say. So I've got my inlet plunger doodah. That's going to have an O-ring on the front face, and it's going to have a larger O-ring around the back there. That is keen to pop back out. So I'm just going to give it a very gentle stretch. These O-rings, what's that? 1.5mm section O-ring. If you give that a good pull, that's going to just break. And you won't get that in your local Halfords or wherever you are. So you have to go a little bit steady, and then we can start to sort of look at how things build back up. This is our pad now. I kind of thought I might get a replacement for that rubber in the kit, but I don't. So good job we didn't throw that away earlier on. And this, of course, has a series of O-rings that need to go into here. These are the ones where we have to form them as they go in. Follow the shape. particularly clever, but there we go. We're going to have another one that's going to be roughly the same section to fit in there. And again, I'm just checking that those stand proud, so I know that they're actually going to do something when the time comes. Our side port there also needs an O-ring. And that one I'm taking to be a fairly large section because it's going into the conical there. Yep. Nearly lost it. That looks pretty good. And then we'll get through to the end of the pump and discover one missing because I've used it up earlier on in the wrong place. Done this before, you know. There we go. So we've got some parts that we can start to piece together. So let's start here. This is the section that's going to fit into the adapter. Okay, we've got our two holes up here which are going to marry up with these, but you can see we've got a lip here which recesses in there. And that means that the shaft seal, which is going to go in here, needs to be through to the other side. So we're going to put it in from that side. It's going to sit that way. These lip seals, you can see they have a sort of flat side and then a side with the lip on it. The lip side is always going to be facing the oil, so that the oil pressure builds up around this, tightening the seal so that it doesn't leak. So that is going to sit in there. And that one I can push that in by hand, which is not absolutely ideal. I'd like that to be good and tight, obviously. It's gone down, it hasn't sat all the way down. So what I'm going to do to finish that off is to take a seal driver which looks like that. You get various sizes of these dies that fit onto the handle. So you choose the one that fits your seal and then give it a whack to tap it in. But because I want this to end up flat and flush with that surface, I'm going to use an oversized piece so that that will come down in contact with the metal and not push the seal all the way through. Otherwise it's just going to go straight through there and pop out the other side. Because I've got lots of small bits on the bench there, I'm going to use a different bench to do my whacking so that I don't end up with everything flying all over the place. And there it is, in there, flat all the way around, which is what we want. So that's how that goes together. Then we can build up the cartridge. So we have our rotor. This is the high vac inlet end of things. So the coupling to the motor is going to be in from this end. So that can push straight into there. Now this slot is open, so we put those vanes in afterwards, but this one is not. So we've got to put the vanes in there before we insert it. And in order to do that, we're going to need our handy kit has come with new springs. Now the old ones are in perfectly serviceable condition. And if I didn't have new ones, I wouldn't have any qualms about putting the old ones back in this instance. But they're there, so we're going to use them. I'm going to need some lubrication to put it together. grab a clean jug, put some oil in there. You've got to lubricate everything as you assemble it. If you assemble the pump dry, then there's no chance that the oil pump is going to circulate oil fast enough to prevent you getting some damage when you start it up. So you want to make sure that everything goes together well lubricated. So those are in, those move nicely, and then that can be inserted through there. So again, plenty of vacuum oil on there. Gently bring it in and offer it up to the centre bearing in the middle there, and you've got to squeeze the vanes together against the springs to fit them in, and that will go all the way up like that, and that's turning nicely. All feels good, happy there. So we can go ahead and put the vanes in the other end. These are all in good condition. Put my new springs in. I'm going to use a finger there just to hold that so that the rotor doesn't fall out on me. And then I can just squeeze those gently together to get them into place. If anything feels tight or feels like it's sticking, stop, take it out, figure out what is causing it to stick. Everything should slide together nicely at this point. So there's nothing else to go into there. So I'm going to go ahead and put the end plate on, which sits like that. And then we had, there we go, that one screw that holds that on. Go ahead and put that in. We may have to loosen that off because when the whole assembly goes together, it may be, you can see I've left some play there. We may need that in order to get the other parts to come together. And then to close off the pump cartridge altogether, we need to close up the other end, but inside there we have our oil pump. So crucial now, we put the oil pump vane back in now. It's going to be really difficult for you to see, but this is chamfered. So it does have an orientation. I think it will probably orientate itself to a certain extent, but if it's 90 degrees off, it just won't fit into the body of the oil pump. So it slots into that hole that it came out of, and it is going to sit very slightly proud one end or the other. And then it all has to slot into here. So, as I said, orientation of this part is important. It has to pick up from the holes in the plate. So this is our top side, and then obviously the bolt holes need to line up there. And then this I'm going to insert over that oil pump, and I'm going to gently feel for it. I'm not entirely sure where it picks up, but there you go. Just by being gentle, it eventually picks up, and then I can rotate the whole thing to get it to the orientation that I need. So that's the main components of our cartridge, we can go ahead now and fit. Got a new valve plate. Again, the old one was still good, but we're going to use that because it's there. I'm going to put the cover on, which is slightly curved. You want it to curve up away from the valve so that it allows it to open. And then the screw goes in to hold all that together. There's a really tiny roll pin just at the back here that aligns all of this. I don't know how good a job it really does of aligning it, but it's there. I'm going to do it by eye as I go, so tighten it up. Just want to make sure that it's definitely going to cover the actual exhaust port and do its job. Tighten it up. Again, doesn't have to be super tight. It needs to hold it there. So at this point, that's the valve plate that we don't need. At this point, we can turn our attention to this valve block on the top. I've already closed off that port and fitted the O-rings that go there. So this is now going to sit over in this direction, holding all of that together. And the valve pieces that need to go back inside are as follows. We've got the thicker, harder of the two springs with the plunger sits in there, and that's going to spend most of its time pushed deep into there, so I'll make sure that fits. And then we have the actual inlet valve assembly. And the way that this goes together is the metal plate with the rubber. This should be bonded onto here, which in this case it's not. It's not going to make any difference to the operation because nothing can move once it's put together. But that's the reason that I had it in two pieces. So that sits in with the rubber facing this way. Spring sits on top, and then the hollow piston drops into there. And then that whole lot will assemble against here. So the piston sits into that hollow, and this plunger will be hard up against there. These are obviously going to fall out just like that, so we'll have to assemble those as we mate it up. So we can go two ways. With the older pumps you had to partially assemble these together, so you would put these together, put the bolt through, leave everything really loose, and then offer the whole thing up in one piece, which was tricky. With what they've done here of moving to this totally flat surface, it does make life easier because it means that we can now offer the cartridge up more traditionally as a piece, and then bring the valve block down onto it. So I'm going to do just that. I've got the two bolts through there to align everything, and what I can then do is offer that up to the adapter, lining those up, and then wind the bolts in. It's going to be easier for me to do it in this orientation. Maybe that works better for you seeing it as well. Making sure that I've got my O-ring in place there. And we are now coming close to that shaft seal, so everything's got to be done gently. It's going to drop into the recess, and provided that those bolts are aligned, they'll drop in like that. Now, the next thing is to assemble the top end of things. And we have a bolt here that goes in that direction, and everything falling out for the moment. So I can just show you that that comes down here and we'll do up into there. So that's got to fit, and then we've got two that go through here in that direction. So I'm going to reassemble for the umpteenth time. Does anyone else say umpteenth? Or is that just a thing over here? So with all of that assembled, I can lower that down. I should have everything in place. Now the trick with these Pfeiffer pumps has always been to get all of these different parts bolted up together and against the adapter correctly, because they're sealing in both directions. This is sealing to here, so it's got to be the right pressure down onto here, and they're both sealing in that direction as well onto the adapter plate. So it can be tricky. I would say the 3 is slightly easier than the 2, but who knows? I haven't run it yet, have I? So you kind of want to go round bit by bit, not tightening anything all the way until everything is nearly there. Not forgetting the long bolts there. Patience is so much part of vacuum pump repair. Who knew? And once I'm confident that everything has gone together, I'm just going to nip up that one last bolt there. You remember that one that we didn't do all the way in case we needed to play. Well, we're done with that now. So there we go. That's the whole assembly put back together again. Got a lot of bits left over. Right, so with that done, we install our oil box, and you'll remember that only 2 screws actually hold the oil box on there, the other 2 being for the motor. All I have to do is find said screws, it's going to need an edit, isn't it? Was it those ones? Do you remember? Because I don't really. See if they fit. those will go in there. And then the motor's going to come in this way. So where's our motor? There's a little motor. It's got a hardwired lead on it, which is kind of a little bit annoying, really. At this point, you could argue that I should have fitted the adapter plate to the motor and then built the pump onto it. Fair point. It can be done either way. I certainly, would sometimes build a pump onto the motor, sometimes build the pump and then fit the motor. I tend to prefer to do the pump first because then I can hand turn it and so on. But in this instance, this is where we got to. So to get the motor shaft through, I need to put a little bit of oil. I want to be careful here that I get the oil just on the lip of the seal, because I want to lubricate that so that the shaft will snug through it easily. But I don't want loads of oil around the outside, because the next thing I'm going to put in there is the felt pad. So I don't want to fill up the felt pad with oil before it's even put back into use. So there's my felt pad. It actually sits into that recess in the motor, like that. And it stands proud and will sit into the recess around the shaft. Seal there as well. So I'll give everything a last little dry up. And then do my best to align these. So I've got the groove there, and the motor shaft is going to sit into that. I can get it roughly right, and then hopefully it'll behave itself and go together. So I'm going to duck right down so that I can see exactly what I'm doing. Drop that into place. And that seems to be happy. So with that lined up, I can turn the whole thing back round. And those two bolts that drop right through there, we'll bring those together. A lot of these very small pumps are built in that way, where you start with the motor and build a pump up. But as I say, there's no one perfect way to do things. If you see better ways to do things, let me know. If you think, why has he done it like that? I wouldn't have done it like that. I'm always interested to know, because I've been doing this a long time, but at no point have I ever claimed to be some kind of guru. You can always learn, can't you? So the final thing to go back on is the base plate. And then we've just got to go back and populate the oil box. Got loads of O-rings left over. Loads. So I've got my drain plug, which is going to take that O-ring. Yeah. down. Fill plug looks like it should be a little bit bigger. Even with all these O-rings left over, I still don't feel that they're necessarily the right size, but what can you do? So there we go. That's that. That's good to go. I'll put some oil in it, I'll get it on the test bench and run it up, and I'll just tag something on the end of this video, let you know how it got on. If you need any assistance, do feel free to get in touch. You can comment under the video, obviously. Please like and subscribe. It would be nice to have more people able to find these videos, and the only way that can happen is by people that have found it, either telling people or liking it. Cheers for now. So there's our Pfeiffer DUO 3 pump on the test bench. No hesitation, straight to 120 minus 3 millibar. This particular one does have this permanent air bleed, so just here, so I'll block that with my thumb. So that blocked off, it sounds a bit more like a normal pump. That air bleed is quite noisy, and I don't have a mist filter fitted on here at the moment. But that's all good. See you next time.